As you can see, beautiful double rainbow all the way across the sky. Absolutely lovely. We're actually getting a thunderstorm at the end of September in northern Alberta. Man, oh man. If climate change isn't real, I'm not even here. Well, good evening, folks. Welcome back to the farm. Beautiful fall evening here. Well, I say it's beautiful. Look over there. That doesn't look very beautiful. It looks like it's going to bring some rain. Hopefully it just slides right by. It's been raining most of the day, actually, and a lot overnight, too. But we're going to run in the chicken house and take a look over there. It'll be a little drier in there. The reason I want to talk about the stuff in the chicken house is, well, it's twofold. Getting the time of year, look at where we are. It's the end of September. We don't have snow yet. That's an anomaly. We are usually feeling winter, or at least the precursor to winter at this time of year. And so a lot of new chicken owners now are asking the questions, and maybe even a few more experienced chicken owners are asking the questions. What are people doing to insulate their chicken house? What does good ventilation look like? How do we keep it dry and control humidity in there? And there's also a lot of folks that are looking at their compost piles and thinking, how do I get this heating up? How do I get this doing what it's supposed to do? Well, compost and chicken houses is one of my favorite things to talk about. So it probably wouldn't take a rocket scientist to figure out this old granary that we converted into a chicken house is probably not the warmest place to reside in the wintertime. Well, maybe that rocket scientist is wrong, because in fact, by using deep litter and composting inside our chicken house, we've actually, over the course of last winter, we were able to keep the inside of the chicken house 40 degrees Celsius warmer than it was outside. So it was actually quite pleasant in there. Now the secret to this, and a lot of people maybe won't believe this, is a single ingredient. It's just one thing. Now, maybe that's a little white lie. Earlier this year, I did add some grass clippings, actually 2 bags out of our lawnmower, to the chicken house as an accelerant. But other than that, one ingredient. Pine shavings, wood shavings, we get in bags. We lay that down on the floor, nice thick layer. It's about 8 to 10 inches thick. And the chickens up in the roosting bars will then poop on that. And every once in a while, we'll come stir it up a little bit. For the most part, we really don't have to. It's very, very low input, because the chickens like to come up here and scratch and dig and stuff like that. So you'll see here in the corner of the chicken house, and this is the most important part, we're able to pile this up, right? So once every couple of weeks, and especially leading into this time of year, I'm going to make a habit of coming out every second weekend and piling this stuff up, right? Because compost piles work on a couple of different principles. Nitrogen to carbon ratio balance. So you want to make sure you got a good 30-to-2 ratio there. Oxygenation. So that's where stacking it up and allowing the chickens to turn it over, and then me stacking it back up again, keeping that oxygen alive inside the pile. And then humidity. So humidity in your chicken house, oh boy, that can be a bad day, right? Humidity in the chicken house can lead to all kinds of respiratory issues, as well as frostbite, and, well, just anytime it mixes with chicken manure, what does that make? Ammonia, whoo-wee, stinky stuff, right? And that, of course, leads to more respiratory issues. So it requires quite a bit of ventilation in your chicken house if you're gonna follow this. Now, when I say ventilation, I don't mean air movement. I don't mean draft. I just mean the ability for air to come from one place and be exchanged into another place. And so you'll see in our chicken house here on the south side, we've got windows. So typically during the summertime, we keep the windows open and keeps it nice and fresh in here. But during the winter time, we keep those closed, and we just get natural sunlight coming in from the south. That helps keep it nice and warm. Behind me here, we have a hatch that stays open pretty much 360 days of the year. Really, it all depends on how cold it gets. When it gets down to like minus 30, minus 35, yeah, I'll shut the door at night, and because I feel pretty bad for the girls. But for the most part, that stays open. And then there's a hatch up top that will also get cracked, especially when we're generating lots of heat in the compost, because that's where the humidity will come up. Humidity level in the coop rises. We want to get that moisture out of here so the chickens aren't breathing that, moist ammonia. But with effective management, effective ventilation, low draft, good insulation in your walls, you can make a pile of heat in here. In fact, last winter when we did an experiment in here, we had a deep litter pile that was probably almost to the bottom of here. So that's got to be, 3 feet deep, right? And it was 160 degrees Fahrenheit in the center of that pile. Now, what does that really mean? Well, you can cook a pork shoulder in 160 degrees Fahrenheit. That's how hot it was in here. Of course, outside the pile, it's not that, but I mean, it does lead to it being quite, as I mentioned before, quite pleasant inside the chicken house. So a critical factor for this to work is the stacking of the material. Now, one thing I noted last year when we were stacking it up, and because there is a lot of moisture management in order to keep the compost pile hot, but keep the air inside the chicken house dry, you want to pile it, right, to generate the heat, and you want to create enough ventilation to let that moisture go. But what I'd observed was in the corners here, where the OSB, or the compost touches the OSB, that the wall looked a little damp. Now, if this is going to be a sustainable thing that I'm going to do over multiple years, I'm probably not going to want that wall to just keep getting wet and keep getting wet and keep getting wet. So I actually have some corrugated metal that I'm going to shovel all this material out here this afternoon. I'm going to put some of that corrugated metal against the wall to protect that wall. I'll probably do it too high, just so that I can get it stacked up nice and high. And you'll see as the winter progresses, if you stay tuned in, maybe now would be a good time to talk about liking and subscribing to our channel. But you'll see as the winter progresses how much material we actually get in here. Because there's times when these roosting bars up top here, you get into February, March, I'm actually banging my head on the top of those because we get the material so deep in here. And it's really important by February to have a good, thick, deep layer in the chicken house, because that's usually here in northern Alberta when we get our coldest months. Now, when I say coldest months, what am I talking about? I'm talking about minus 50 degrees Celsius. So that's certainly not a day I want to spend any time outside. Certainly not a day that the chickens want to spend any time outside. So last year, over the course of the winter, I got a ton of questions from people asking why their deep litter wasn't working. Now, there's a couple of reasons why. Because 6 months of the year, I want this to look like this: dry, crumbly, as dry as can possibly be, right? And I'm doing that for respiratory health inside the chicken house, right? I don't want any, moisture and ammonia and all that stuff happening. But when it gets cold, there needs to be enough moisture in the pile that I can grab this and I can squeeze it into a ball and it stays in a ball. Now, of course, it doesn't do that right now, and that's fine because I don't want it to do that right now. But when it gets cold, I need to be able to squeeze it and form a ball, and then I should be able to crumble that ball easily without, it basically staying in a ball. And that's how you know you've got enough humidity inside your pile that if the other things like carbon and nitrogen ratio and oxygenation are balanced, you will generate an incredible amount of heat in your chicken house. So why is it when you do this isn't working? So, well, when did you start? So if you started building this in November, December, January, it's not going to work, right? Because all this frozen material hasn't had time to create a familial environment for microbes, bacteria, and all the things that actually generate heat inside your chicken house. Now, for a minute, let's talk about the environment that's actually required for the microbes and the bacteria in compost to actually multiply and flourish. As you can see, I've already swept away all the dry material that was here, and I've gone ahead and installed the tin. So this is what's going to keep any moisture inside that compost pile from contacting the OSB in the wall and leading to potential subsequent failure or damage of the building down the road. So this is not necessarily a tip or a how-to, but it's just something that I've observed and I think maybe would be beneficial for us. So we're going to give it a try. Anyways, the environment for compost to work well. Well, there's just one thing that is rarely talked about when it comes to backyard composting and deep litter specifically. It's oftentimes, you think, well, my composting isn't working on my chicken house floor. Why is it not working? Well, if you've got the appropriate amount of moisture, if you've got your pile oxygenated, if you've got a good carbon and nitrogen balance, what is it that's not happening? So when you think about the fire triangle as an example, what do you need? You need heat, you need fuel, you need oxygen. Similar to composting, right? You need mixture, your carbon and nitrogen balance, you need oxygen, and you need moisture. But similarly to the fire triangle, there is actually another side. Now, with fire triangle, it's actually a tetrahedron, and the other side is a chemical reaction, right? So with composting, the other side of that tetrahedron is mass. So there is a minimum size requirement for your pile for it to begin to generate and then hold that heat and build that heat. And that is, rule of thumb, not always perfect, but 1 cubic meter, right, is a good number. If you're any smaller than a cubic meter, it's just not going to happen. Now, this is why it works really good if you go a meter by a meter by a meter and not just, 2 feet deep and 3 feet wide kind of thing. You really want to have that depth, that mass compiled in one area, and that's why we use the corner of the chicken house here as a good place to pile that up. And we do a very similar thing underneath our nesting boxes here. When it gets really cold, we can generate a pile of heat underneath the nesting boxes, and that keeps our eggs from freezing as well. So now, balancing moisture levels in your chicken house might be a conversation for another day, but if you look at this kind of material here, this is very dry, and you might be thinking, well, how do I get it from this to something that I can squeeze and make a ball with? And over the summer months, you're going to notice that it's a lot warmer, it's a lot drier, and as you get into the autumn and the winter, the relative humidity climbs. And oftentimes I see people asking the question, how can I get the humidity down in my chicken house? And so then you ask the question, well, what's the relative humidity in the chicken house? And they say, well, it's 85%. Okay, well, what's the relative humidity outside? Well, it's 85%. So you're never going to get the relative humidity in the air lower in the chicken house than it is outside. That's almost impossible unless you seal it up and you actually run a dehumidifier in here, which would be awful. That's not not something you want to do. But you can manage this. If it's not moist enough, right? Chicken poop is 80 to 85% water. So maybe just don't add as many shavings, right? If you maybe skip a week and let some of that manure build up and balance off some of this. Now, if you go off ratio a little bit and you end up a little bit more nitrogen rich than carbon rich, don't worry. The heating is still going to happen. It's the nitrogen that makes the magic happen. That's fine. But aversely, okay, well, I just can't get enough moisture in this thing, and I can't get it to generate any heat. How am I going to do this? So you've got your big pile, 1 cubic meter in the corner. You can add a half a cup of water. Now, again, be cognizant of the fact that water and chicken manure creates ammonia. So this is something you're going to have to watch and something you're going to have to manage, and you're going to have to stir it up. So pull all your pile out, sprinkle a half a cup throughout your pile as you restack it, and then watch the magic happen. Now, aversely, if your pile is too wet, what do? Well, again, you're just going to have to add more wood shavings in the interim. Keep it stirred up. Come in regularly, stir it up, pile it up. Let the chickens dig it down. Pile it up, let the chickens dig it down. They're fantastic at aerating and oxygenating compost piles. So don't stress about it too much. But if it gets really sloppy to the point where, yes, you are noticing high levels of ammonia, like if you come in and you're like, whew, then it's time to actually, well, it's already too late, but it is time to actually take immediate action in your coop. And that's going to look, okay, well, there's a certain amount of material that I'm going to have to literally shovel out and remove from the coop so that it doesn't cause respiratory issues in the birds. Anyways, it's time for me to go fetch up a cup of tea, so I hope you found the video useful. If you did, don't forget, go down below, smash the like button, maybe subscribe while you're at it. And if you got any questions, don't hesitate to drop them in the comments section. But as I said, I'll let you go for now. I hope you have a fantastic evening, and we'll see you tomorrow.